John T. Jackson's my name, and I'm still employed with NASA, and I'm a facility manager for Building 15. And that's just because over my experience here, I was in human factors. I moved around and did different jobs, had so many other different experiences. They need somebody for that, take care of the buildings, and so they offered me that job, and I was happy to have it, and I'm still happy to have it. They were been very good to me here at NASA. I'm going on my 52nd year, and that's not. I lost my wife back in 2000, and so I enjoyed being here, having something to do. I started in 1965 or 6 it was. It was right at the end of Jiminy, when Jiminy came back, and I was hired in at that time. Certainly there was no space when I was around. It wasn't on the table. But the airplanes were, and I was interested in airplanes and all of that. But I went into the Marine Corps. I volunteered for that when I was 17, and I had an opportunity maybe to go into Naval Air, but I thought, I'll never make it in time because I'm competing with a lot of college graduates and I'm high school, and basically the war will probably be over at the time I could get to be a pilot. But so I had seen some film on where they would, what the Japanese had done to our American soldiers from Bataan. And I thought, that's not good. And so I was eager to get in the Marine Corps and get over there and kind of help take care of those people if we could. And once I got over and got ready, I thought maybe I should have gotten the Navy. I'd have been a lot better to be aboard ship than going in there. But anyway, I joined the 4th Marine Division, and they just came off of Iwo Jima. And I got to train, and that was a blessing with guys who had been in a lot of combat. And we were ready to go to Japan. We were going to invade Japan, and we're going aboard ship. And I knew nothing about the atom bomb, and it dropped. And fortunately, the war ended. In fact, when I enlisted in the Marine Corps, the lady asked me to sign me up. Said, "Do you want a 4-year enlistment or the reserves?" And I said, "Well, I want the reserves because if I make it, I'm coming back and go to college." And she says, "You don't want to be a real Marine?" And I said, "No, ma'am." And I kind of laughed about it, but I went through the same thing and so forth. So I came on back and started the local college, Texas Christian University. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I got into what we call pre-engineering. But I met a beautiful young Norwegian nurse and got married, and I said, well, I got to really go to work now. When I got out to General Dynamics, or when I was in the Marine Corps, down at boot camp, they said, we see you got typing, you need to go take a typing test. And I said, I didn't join this thing to be a typist. And the DI says, get your so-and-so over there. I said, yes, sir. And I got over there, and I said, I'll fool them. I'll flunk this test, and I did. But that stayed on my record, and I didn't know it. Well, General Dynamics looked at it, and they said, we've got a place for you here on the flight line, keeping track of all the hours these people work on their airplanes. Over time, they knew that I'd taken math and engineering drawing, things like that, and the Korean War came along. And they said, how would you like to be an electrician? And I said, oh, that'd be fine because it's an increase in salary. So I went over and they assigned me with one of the best people to work with. And that was a blessing. He had the respect of management. I learned that that was an important aspect to have if you're going to have a mentor. And we became good friends. And I was troubleshooting airplanes with electrical problems. So what they do, a B-36 could fly practically around the world. And they'd take off from Fort Worth and go to Alaska and fly them, come on back in, and when they land, they'd have ice still on in the airplane and all of that. And it's a big airplane. From up, it's there were 6 pusher engines and 4 jets. And the idea was it's so big that they could fly so high that fighters couldn't get up in that air and shoot them down because they couldn't maneuver as well. And I sat out there, and since I was small, I could climb up in that airplane when it was running and make adjustments on the electrical connections that had to be made. But we had what we call alternators. That was new then. And it gives them AC output. And so I did that for a long time, and then one afternoon I came to work and was there on the flight line, and the Air Force, Carswell Air Force Base was across the way, and they had 36s lined up getting ready for a mission. And it's kind of rainy and cloudy, and all of a sudden, boom, out came a big bust of flames. And wow, what was that? And I was watching it. It went out, and then guys come out of the wheel well, dropped out of the airplane, started running. And then they got away, and then that airplane caught fire. And it burned up. After seeing that, I got my bottom off those airplanes. General Dynamics lost the bid with Boeing. Boeing won out and got the B-52 bomber, and we went down the drain. And Bell Helicopter had just built a plant there in the Fort Worth area. And I had a sister that worked out there. She says, come out here, we'll hire you. So I went out there and went to work with Bell Helicopter in electrical. And I got a degree in clinical psychology from Texas Christian. And part of the reason we had the United States Public Health Service hospital there in the area that treated veterans and addicts and so forth. And a lot of the faculty, doctors and PhDs, taught at the university. And so I got ready to get a master's. I did it in the Rorschach test because we had an outstanding authority work for the government there. But with that kind of degree, I was out there working as an electrician, and I thought, I worked there 4 years, but I'm not going to stay here and go get a degree and do that. And so I looked around to get into a doctorate program, and they had one at the University of Houston I applied for. And prior to that, they opened up what they called a human factors group. And that they'll take you with their background in human behavior and so forth. And I went to my management and said, I'd like to move over there and get in that group. I knew the people and knew of them. And they looked at me and they said, nope, we don't want to lose you. Oh, and I thought, man, I'm not going to go spend all that time in college and stay here. And that. So I came down here to Houston, moved my family and all, and we moved here. And in the meantime, I went to the University of Houston, but I also got a job with the Harris County Probation Department. So I became a probation officer and worked with Baytown, the school district too. And that was good. But after a couple of years of that kind of work, I decided I'm not going to be helping these kids too much. So I left General Dynamics. San Diego came through wanting some people. And so I applied and went out to San Diego to work on the Atlas missile system. And out at the Atlas missile system, again, eventually we began to run out of business, and I could see that. And I sat down with the Air Force had what they called a personnel subsystem test and evaluation program, and they had never run it. So I got in with the industrial engineer, and we sat down and came up with a way to go up and evaluate that missile. They bring it up from San Diego in what they call stretch, the Atlas, and turn it over to the Air Force. They would take it and get it ready and then launch it. But they were having trouble doing that. And so what I said, we need to go in and look at all the different things they do to get that missile ready. And sure enough, we put observers in. We did not interfere, but our suggestion, I'd go in and we'd pick up problems. The reason the Air Force can't successfully launch the Atlas was because that they were not engineers. So what we did is back up and bring in General Electric, and they ran a testing program on your aptitude and law, and behold, we found that the Air Force was more inclined to be engineers, and the engineers had a higher aptitude. They asked me to stay on. I had been in the military, so I stayed with, as they got through, we had what we called a deviation difficulty report. Anytime something happens, you make a note and turn it in. Well, they asked me to put the final report together, and I was looking at that, and I said, we're not getting much from our General Dynamics people. But Rockwell had the engines, and they were really good. And so I wrote up that report, and I went back to San Diego, and I stayed though with the Air Force, and they gave me a nice letter of commendation. But I liked them. We all got along fine. And I went back and I got the report out, and it came sailing back from the top office. We don't put out a report like that. I'm telling you that Atlas wasn't ready to turn over to the Air Force. And so my boss came up, and he was very nice about it. Big boss, he said, John, he says, I've got to find somebody that can weasel the words better than you do. And so they got it out, and it worked out fine. The 8th Air Force was taking over the missile. And by the way, I was out there when Vandenberg, when they launched John Glenn around in the Atlas. And we had quite a few of them to blow up, and some of them blew up over the site where the Air Force people live. And I was there with a major from Carswell Air Force Base, and we were down in the valley, and they were going to launch. He says, John, if that thing blows up on the pad, it'll knock us down. Well, it did blow up on the pad, but fortunately it did knock us down. It got up enough. And but there was a lot of questions about the Atlas, and we've experienced that later here in the space program. You know, not everything goes like it should. But so I came back. I was out there in Fort Worth Division of General Dynamics. We got the F-111 airplane. Well, prior to that, I said, we're running out of business. And I went to air defense, and that was one of the nicer jobs that we had. We were going around the country at that time with stations around monitoring incoming planes or whatever. And I was out at David Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. And for instance, they had 3 weeks, a pilot set up like a fireman up in a hangar. And they had cards and ate, slept, and did everything, but they had a fireman's pole. And they had their airplane down there with a parachute in it and all of bing, when they get a warning, they come down there, get in that airplane, and take off for interception. And it was an interesting program and all, but and I liked it. Then we worked with just computer cards, IBM's cards, and I had a program called Noise Gen. What it was with the Air Force around the country looking at their radar sets up there, they'd get a lot of dots on that thing, and I could go around and help them. They did not want the Air Force people calling the programmer directly. They had me in between because I was working with the people. And that's when we had IBM machines, and the buildings were huge for, you know, my goodness, it would be the house, what it took then. And today we carry more in our cell phone. It was amazing. But anyway, so General Dynamics got the F-111 contract, swept wing. It really went to Boeing, but Washington said no. The Secretary of Defense says, we want more commonality. So bingo. And I knew the people, and I called them, and I said, I'd like to come back to Fort Worth, and I can go to school there too. We finally got a doctorate program in experimental psych that I'd like to take. So we moved back to Fort Worth Division. And since I'd worked on the flight line, I knew some people. They put me upstairs in what we call the furnishings department. That's where the cockpit all comes together. And the man that ran that had been around through the B-24 and so on. And we got along real fine, and I got to know the people and work with the engineers very closely. And the test pilots asked me, said, John, we can't read this. We had a twin-engine Convair liner, we called it. We took everything